Hello, my brothers and sisters, and welcome to another episode of Off the Beaten Path, the show that looks at paranormal events both historically as well as in modern-day times. As always, I'm your host, rev.hagen, and as always, I'd like to welcome our listeners at SCRMradio.com. That's SCRMradio.com for all your horror and paranormal needs. Now, today we're doing something, we're introducing something that I've been threatening to introduce for a long time and kind of introduced it in another episode. But here we go. A new segment on Off the Beaten Path is Strange and Unusual Facts.
Strange and Unusual Facts.
Now, today's Strange and Unusual Facts is, in 1957, a scientist named Edmund Schumann discovered an amazing tree. It was so strange looking and amazing that he ended up doing a core sample of this tree. Kind of like you do with ice, but he did it with a tree. And what he discovered were 4,600 rings. And he could tell by these rings weather and climate in general that happened to the tree over the years and the age of the tree. Now, Schumann was the first to bring rings into science as counting instruments and weather recorders. Now, imagine this tree lived for 4,600 years plus and is still living in the Inyo National Forest. And of course, they won't tell us the exact location of this tree because we're human beings. And we'll do something strange and horrible to it, like spray paint it, or, oh, I need a chunk of this tree because it's so cool, or we're going to burn this tree down for some weird anti-climate control extravaganza. But I just thought that was an amazing, strange, and unusual fact.
Strange and Unusual Fact.
Now, our main topic today is the Winchester Mystery House. This is near and dear to me because I grew up in the Bay Area and lived for a long time 10 miles away from this place. At one point, I was half a mile away. Been to this place 10 times. If I've been to it once, every time relatives would come over, we'd go to the Winchester Mystery House. So I've taken the tour, and as a kid, the best part of the tour was at the end where you're dumped into the gift shop. And since I've been obsessed with the horror and the paranormal since I was a little kid, and you walk in and there's skull stuff everywhere, ghost stuff, and things you can only find at the Winchester Mystery House. That was really my draw when I was a kid. Didn't really pay attention too much to the tours until later on in life. So I'm going to read a little synopsis about it, and then we'll get into kind of the nuts and bolts of what was really going on there. To understand the Winchester Mystery House, you have to understand Sarah Winchester. Winchester had inherited a vast fortune off of guns. Her father-in-law, Oliver Winchester, the manufacturer of the famous Winchester repeater rifle that kind of won the West, died in 1880, and her husband, Will, died a year later. So she inherited this huge sum of money. After that happened, she moved from New Haven, to San Jose, California. She dedicated a large part of her fortune to ceaseless, enigmatic, can I speak today? I don't know. Enigmatic building. She built her house with shifts of 16 carpenters who were paid 3 times the going rate and worked 24 hours a day, every day, from 1886 until Sarah's death in 1922. Okay, now that's kind of the legend there, all right? She worked on this house like other people work with yarn. She would weave and unweave eternally. She'd build an area, have these guys build this huge area, and then she'd tear it down. A lot of the building that went on, there was no architectural plan for this building. Most of the building that went on were was sketches that she drew on napkins, on brown paper. She built additions, towers, cupolas, rooms that made no sense and had no purpose. We'll get into that. Sometimes only to be plastered over the next day, like we just said. In 1975, workers discovered a new room, a room that nobody knew existed. This is in 1975. Now, according to the legend, They stopped building this house at her death in 1922, which we will correct in just a moment. But in 1975, they discovered a new room. It had 2 chairs, early 1900 speakers that fit into an old phonograph, and the door latched by a 1910 lock. She had apparently forgotten about it and just built right over it. In 1911, the San Jose Mercury News, which is a great newspaper that I used to read every single morning when you still read newspapers, called the Winchester Colossus a great question mark in a sea of apricot and olive orchards. Now, you've got to understand, if you go to Silicon Valley now, it is solid. The occupancy rate is less than 1%. It's one of the most expensive places in the nation to live. On par, believe it or not, with Manhattan in New York. So when you look at it now, if you're up on a mountain, which you can easily do, and look down on the valley, you see nothing but houses. I mean, there's trees. It's Northern California, so there's a lot more trees, but it's just constant buildings now. When I moved there in '72, it was mostly orchards, and when she built her house way back in the day, it had to be nothing but orchards. So she's building this massive house in San Jose, California, in basically a sea of orchards. The mansion is an ornately complex answer to the very simple question, why? Her building is a ghost story of the American gun, and so the legend went. The legend of this, and this is kind of factual, really hard to get to the nuts and bolts of this one. A spiritualist in the mid-1800s, when plenty of people really believed in spiritualism, and you weren't some nutball that believed going to a spiritualist and talking to the dead, or going to a medium to find out your future. A lot of people believed that back in the day. When she became terrified that her misfortunes, especially the death of her husband and her 1-month-old daughter, which is very sad, were a cosmic retribution of the spirits of the people that were killed by the Winchester gun, right? The rifles. A relative said many decades later, Winchester fell under the thrall of a medium who told her that she would be haunted by the ghost of Winchester rifles unless she built nonstop, perhaps at the ghost's direction for their pleasure, or perhaps for a way to elude them. Haunted by conscience over gun blood fortune and seeking either protection or absolution, Winchester lived almost like a hermit. She did live in isolation. Her only contact really were the guys helping her build this house. And what a house. Even today it's an amazing house, but back then, an amazing house. It had a staircase, one of 40, that goes nowhere and ends in the ceiling. Cabinets and doors open into walls. Rooms are boxes within boxes. Small rooms are built within big rooms. Balconies and windows are inside rather than outside. Chimneys stop floors short of the ceiling. Floors have skylights. Linen closets as big as an apartment are next to cupboards that are less than an inch deep. Crazy. Doors open into walls. One room has a normal-sized door next to a small child-sized one. Another one has a secret door identical to one on a closet that could be opened from within the room, but not from without. And the closet drawers couldn't open. They weren't able to open. Now, in one room, Sarah laid this deal in an unusual pattern on the floor of the wood, right? When the light hit the floor in a particular way, the dark boards appeared light and the light boards appeared dark. Bullseye windows give an upside-down view of the outside world. Even the basic truths of up and down, light and dark were subverted in this house. She made this house as unusual as she possibly could. There are allusions and symbols and mysterious encryptions all over the place. The ballroom features 2 meticulously crafted Tiffany art glass windows. where inscriptions were hidden, and one of them read, "These same thoughts people this little world." Oh, these same thoughts people this little world, which is from Shakespeare's Richard II, who Richard II was deposed of power and alone in a cell. And this king had an idea to create a world within his prison cell populated only by imaginings and ideas. That's how Richard II kind of got through being imprisoned. And so to have that quote by a woman who has isolated herself, partly as retribution that she felt for being a part of this family that had made their fortune off the killing of people, and did believe that these ghosts were going to bother her unless she continued to build this house. Crazy. So the home itself was built using something called a floating foundation, which is believed to have saved the house during the 1906 earthquake in San Francisco, which was a big one, and the 1989 Loma Prieta quake that stopped the World Series that year, threw me to the ground, and just caused devastation in the Bay Area. But the Winchester Mystery House survived because of the floating foundation way that they built the house. And basically it's that if the foundation below the house weighs as much as the structure itself, it will survive any quake. Fascinating stuff. Here's the gig about the earthquake in 1906, though, my brothers and sisters. When an earthquake hit in 1906, Sarah reportedly was trapped in a room, in her bedroom, supposedly, for several hours and felt as though she was being punished once again with the Winchester curse. She totally freaked out. She stopped construction on the house, boarded it up, and began living full-time in her 2 other properties. Her sudden departure can only explain why the architecture of the house is so strange and technically unfinished. So she did not build this house till her dying day. She stopped after the 1906 earthquake because she was so freaked out being trapped in that room for hours. She couldn't take it anymore, so she finally left the house. So no, I hate to dispel that myth, but no, construction did not stop on the day she died. It stopped after the 1906 earthquake. But she would just have this habit of they'd build something and then they'd say, no, tear it down. What we're going to do now is go into some of the ghostly ghost stories that are associated with this, and then some of the really strange things about the architecture. The case of the ghostly handyman. Now, a lot of people have seen a figure that has dark hair and dark clothes with a wheelbarrow working on the fireplaces. What's the other one? He's working on the fireplaces in the ballroom. I didn't know that, the wheelbarrows followed you into the afterlife, but apparently in this case, that's what people have seen. Tour guides are constantly feeling a presence, feeling like they're being watched. There's something that they call the secret of the invisible hand. There was a guy that started work early on something they call a hall of fires because of all the fireplaces in this hall. So there's a ton of fireplaces in this place. He was working on a ladder and he felt somebody tap him on the shoulder. So much so that he turned around and said, "Yeah, what do you want?" And nobody was there. Now, this is before they opened it to tours, so it was really quiet. Not before they opened it to tours in general, but before the tours opened that day. Let me clarify that. So he felt the tap, turned around, nobody was there. Then he felt a push on his lower back, turned around, there was nobody there, and that's when he said, "Okay." And to his credit, he didn't bolt and scream like a 3-year-old and run out of the room. He just kind of quietly got his ladder and drove on to another project in the house before all the tourists showed up to see the amazing Winchester Mystery House. This is something that was called the Heavy Sigh. Now, one of the tour guides, whose I believe name was Samantha, was leading the visitors to the room where Sarah had been trapped in the earthquake, her bedroom. One of the many bedrooms, but the bedroom that she used most often in the quake. She was about to the last of the people were coming in. She was ushering them in. she heard a sigh behind her. She turned around and saw the shadow of a smaller person turn the corner. Now, she ran around that corner immediately, and there was nobody there, but she heard another sigh. These few things that I'm reading here are literally just a few of hundreds, if not thousands, of stories associated with this house. The guy in the wheelbarrow is seen all the time. This kind of shadow figure happens a lot. I'm trying to find one more here. That's the idea of the house, though, is that not only do people feel watched, but they have seen and felt and smelled things quite often. Some of the stuff about this room, now there are doors that lead to nowhere, right? Doors and windows are a common occurrence in the house that don't lead anywhere, or the windows that look down on another room. The weirdest door, though, that leads to nowhere is one on the second floor where you open it up and there's a 2-story drop. It just literally opens out into the open to nowhere, to a 2-story drop. Crazy. There's a seance room. According to legend, Sarah carried the only key to her beloved seance room, where she would commune nightly with spirits in order to receive new instructions for designing the house. However, the spookiest part about the room is that there's only one entrance and 3 exits. One of the 3 exits is even through a closet, but once you've left, the door's shut behind you and can't be opened from the outside. You can only open the exit doors from the inside. One of the earliest qualities of the mansion is the completely upside down, downside up nature of the design. There are cabinets and doors that open up into walls, open up into nothing. Balconies and windows, like I've said, are found indoors, and some floors even have skylights into other floors. Crazy. Features include linen closets the size of a small apartment, like I've said earlier, next to cupboards that are less than an inch thick. That's just crazy. Normal-sized doors next to child-sized doors. They're out of the total of 40, let me drink here, my brothers and sisters. Of the 40 staircases located throughout the house, one set of stairs, for reasons known only to Sarah and the spooks, goes straight up into the ceiling. And when you see this thing, it is just surreal. Also, due to her arthritis, though, most of the stairways are only about this tall and long, and a little bit up and long, because her arthritis was so bad and it was so hard for her to get around the house. We've already discussed the forgotten room. And for some reason, the number 13, which is an unlucky number to a lot of people, not to me. To me, it's almost a holy number, and I'll tell you why. Because there are 13 moons in the year. 13 has never been bad luck for me, and since the moon is part of my spiritual path, not to digress here, but we do believe in Wicca that if you're in touch with the phases of the moon, you're more in touch with yourself, and then more in touch with the earth, and as well as the seasons of the earth. You're more in touch with yourself, with God, with the universe, with everything. So there you have it. But she was obsessed with the number 13. It can be found hidden in numerous places throughout the mansion. There are 13 windows with 13 planes, 13 step staircases, 13 ceiling panels in rooms, and 13 bathrooms with 13 windows in the 13th bathroom. And the other gig is the 3rd floor. Apparently, tour guides do their best to avoid the 3rd floor. At night, strange footsteps and voices are heard there all the time. Can you imagine how cool it would be? As to my fellow paranormal investigators, as well as to anybody who thinks this stuff is cool. Can you imagine how cool it would be to be able to be granted permission to do an investigation in the Winchester Mystery House? God, that would just be amazing. And of course, when they go to the 3rd floor, there's nobody there. If you get a chance and you're in the Bay Area, be sure to try and check out the Winchester Mystery House. You might want to call in advance. I don't know how busy it is now. It used to be right next to these 2 Century theaters that I stood in line for Star Wars the entire summer of that year. There also used to be a Bob's Big Boy. Remember Bob's Big Boy if you're from California? Oh, it was so great. In the parking lot there. But it's right off the freeway, the Winchester Mystery House. Check it out if you're ever in the area. It really is something to see. The gift shop, even as an adult, is still pretty spectacular, if I'm being honest. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. The listeners on Scream can't see this, but I'm wearing my Grimm sweatshirt that I got from my son, Prepped Ghost, who has his own channel here, whose channel is in the notes. Be sure to check it out. He's turning that into an almost strictly gaming channel, by the way. But be sure to check out Winchester Mystery House anytime you're in the Bay Area. It's in San Jose. You will not be disappointed. I will leave actually the contact information for the Winchester Mystery House in the notes below. So that's it for this episode of Off the Beaten Path. I really, really hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed the new goofy format for strange and unusual events. It's going to be part of the show for a bit, unless you guys tell me otherwise. Let me know if you like it or not in the notes below. Please, as always, like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell. I'm going to give my pitch again for the Patreon page. I really need your help to continue doing this show. Please, if you can, become a patron on my Patreon page. You can become a patron for $1, for $5. You can become a monthly patron. Anything that you would like to donate to help keep this show going, we would be so grateful. I can't even tell you. By we, I mean me and my family. So again, like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that Patreon page. I'm so glad you guys decided to stop by. And as always, my brothers and sisters, you keep those heads up.